In with some of the lesser-known pirates and gradually make our way toward the most infamous ones on the list. Number 7. Captain Kidd. William Kidd, more famously known as Captain Kidd, might just be the goofiest pirate in history. He was actually a privateer, meaning he was a government-authorized pirate, commissioned to attack and plunder enemy ships. Kidd served England in the American colonies and was active between 1695 and 1698. In 1696, Kidd and his crew sailed past a Navy yacht and failed to salute it, a gesture required by naval protocol. In response, the Navy yacht fired a warning cannonball near Kidd's ship, demanding proper respect. But instead of complying, Kidd turned around and mockingly slapped his own cheeks in their direction. As amusing as he thought he was, the joke didn't last long. The captain of the Navy vessel retaliated by forcibly drafting most of Kidd's crew into naval service. Over the following years, Kidd would cycle through several different crews and gained a reputation as a harsh and demanding leader. One incident that stood out was when a crew member urged Kidd to attack a passing ship. Kidd refused and insulted him, calling him a lousy dog. The crewman shot back, "If I'm a lousy dog, it is because you made me one." In a violent response, Kidd dropped a steel bucket on the man's head, cracking his skull and killing him. Captain Kidd's most significant act was the seizure of the Quedagh Merchant, an Indian vessel loaded with rich fabrics, gold, and silver. The issue? It wasn't an enemy ship. It had actually paid England for safe passage. That single event triggered Kidd's downfall. He was labeled a pirate and became a wanted man. He was eventually captured on July 6, 1699, and sentenced to hang for piracy and murder. Captain William Kidd was executed on May 23, 1701. But here's the twist. When the trapdoor opened and his body fell, the rope snapped, and he crashed to the ground, dazed but alive. Stunned spectators surrounded him, some even demanding his release, taking the failed hanging as a divine sign. But mercy wasn't in the cards. He was quickly restrained, re-hung, and then gibbeted. 6. Black Bart. Bartholomew Roberts, famously known as Black Bart, was a Welsh pirate and arguably the most successful one to ever sail the seas. In a remarkably short pirating career from 1719 to 1722, he managed to achieve staggering success. Bart's reputation wasn't just built on his victories. He was also known as an extremely strict leader. He even established his own set of rules, famously referred to as the Pirate Code. One rule, for instance, stated that anyone caught stealing from a fellow crew member or deserting during battle would be marooned, left alone on an isolated island to fend for themselves. Most never made it back. But after 3 years of plundering, Bart's fortune finally ran out. On February 10, 1722, while at sea, his ship was spotted by a British warship and a fierce battle broke out. Not long into the fight, Bart was fatally struck in the throat by a shot. As his body lay lifeless on the deck, his crew carried out his last wish. They wrapped him in a sail, weighed him down, and committed his body to the sea. Bart had always said that when his time came, the ocean should be his grave. His body was never recovered. As for the remaining crew, those who survived the skirmish were captured, taken back to England, and charged with piracy. 5. The Gentleman Pirate. Stede Bonnet, more famously known as the Gentleman Pirate, has one of the most unusual stories in the history of piracy. Born into a wealthy English family on the island of Barbados, Bonnet's path to piracy was anything but typical. While most men turned to the sea in desperate search of fortune, Bonnet set sail purely in pursuit of adventure. Unlike other pirates who seized their ships through force, Bonnet simply paid to have his custom built, naming it the Revenge. He assembled a crew of 70 men, heavily depending on them to sail the ship, since he had absolutely no knowledge or experience at sea. Unsurprisingly, this led to his crew having little to no respect for him. Where most pirate crews were paid by splitting the loot from captured ships, Bonnet did things differently. He paid his men a salary from his own pocket, essentially buying their loyalty. Sure, it all sounds a bit ridiculous, like a rich man role-playing as a pirate, but here's where things start to take a serious turn. Bonnet and his crew quickly found success along the eastern seaboard, capturing at least 8 ships. Just as things were picking up, he crossed paths with a Spanish man of war. Severely outgunned, Bonnet lost half his crew and sustained serious injuries. After retreating from battle, he ended up in the Bahamas, where he encountered and partnered with one of the most notorious pirates of all time, though we'll keep that name under wraps for now. Together, they captured at least 11 more ships before parting ways. But after witnessing the new leader in action, half of Bonnet's men abandoned him, opting to join the more competent pirate instead. In an unexpected twist, King George's Act of Grace offered pardons to pirates who vowed to abandon their criminal ways. ways. Bonnet accepted the pardon, but never truly intended to go straight. He changed both his name and the name of his ship, as if no one would notice. A few months later, Bonnet was captured and brought to Charleston, South Carolina to stand trial for piracy. But he had other ideas. He managed to escape, only to be recaptured, hanged, and gibbeted. His body was later buried in a marsh below the waterline, in an unmarked location. To this day, the final resting place of the gentleman pirate remains a mystery. 4. Charles Vane. Charles Vane may very well be the most ruthless and violent pirate to have ever sailed the seas. While other pirates gained notoriety for their daring raids, Vane earned his reputation through pure brutality, regularly beating, torturing, and interrogating the sailors he captured. Much of Vane's early life remains a mystery, but what is known is that he rose through the ranks and became a captain in the Bahamas around 1717. That same year, he was captured by a British Royal Navy officer. However, Vane managed to secure his release by claiming he would accept King George's pardon and leave piracy behind. But with a clean slate, Vane wasted no time returning to his old ways. He resumed raiding and plundering ships around the Bahamas, diving headfirst back into piracy. During this time, he captured numerous sailors, torturing them mercilessly, beating, cutting, burning, and eventually hanging them in attempts to extract information. On one particularly grim occasion, Vane sailed to Charleston, South Carolina, and hijacked a ship carrying slaves. What must have initially felt like a moment of salvation quickly turned into horror for those on board when they realized the ship was now under Charles Vane's control. Then came November 23, 1718. Out at sea, Vane and his crew spotted a large ship on the horizon. As usual, they hoisted the Jolly Roger to scare their target into surrender, but this time they were met with a barrage of cannon fire. The ship was a French naval vessel. In a panic, Vane ordered a retreat. Once they were out of danger, Vane's crew turned on him, calling the retreat an act of cowardice. He was expelled from his own ship, with only a small number of loyal men sticking by him. For several months, Vane continued his savage ways, capturing and burning ships, torturing and killing without remorse. But in February 1719, a fierce storm left him and his remaining crew shipwrecked on a deserted island. Stranded for over a month, they scavenged for food, barely surviving. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, a ship arrived to refill its water supply. Overjoyed, the men rushed to seek help, only for Vane to be recognized by someone aboard. He was quickly arrested, taken to Jamaica, and found guilty of piracy. His punishment was execution by hanging, followed by gibbeting. 3. The King of Pirates. Long Ben. No pirate has ever left behind a greater mystery than Henry Every, more famously known as Long Ben. He went by many names: Long Ben, the Arch Pirate, and the King of Pirates. But for simplicity, we'll call him Every. Every was an English pirate who operated in both the Atlantic and Indian Oceans during the mid-1690s. In just 2 years, he managed to carve out one of the most legendary legacies in all of pirate history. Unlike most pirates, Every first tried to live a respectable life. He joined the Royal Navy, then worked aboard a slave trade vessel. It was during this time that he picked up the skills he'd eventually use to become one of the richest pirates to ever sail. While on a Spanish expedition, the crew wasn't paid for their work, so they mutinied and seized the ship. Every was elected captain. Desperate to support their families, the crew turned to piracy. Over the next few months, Every and his men captured multiple ships, including 3 English merchant vessels, 2 Danish ships, and even a French pirate ship. But the event that would cement Every's place in pirate history came on September 7th, 1695. He joined forces with 5 other pirate captains and their crews, amassing a fleet with over 440 men. The newly formed alliance chose Every as their leader. Their target, the Ganj-e-Sawai, one of the largest and most heavily armed trade ships of its time, belonging to the Mughal Empire. Once they spotted it, Every gave the command to attack. The crew stormed the vessel, and brutal hand-to-hand combat erupted. The bloody battle raged for hours, with heavy losses on both sides. But in the end, Every and his crew emerged victorious. They made off with between 200,000 and 600,000 pounds, along with around 500,000 gold and silver coins, a total haul worth roughly 115 million pounds, or about $143 million in today's money. The pirates divided the treasure, with Every taking a bigger share for himself. Once news of the raid spread, both the English and Indian governments placed a massive bounty on Every's head, triggering the first ever global manhunt. And this is where the mystery deepens. After splitting the loot, Every and his men agreed agreed to scatter in order to avoid capture. Every gave his crew conflicting stories about where he planned to settle and enjoy his fortune. In time, some of his men were caught and interrogated. They gave up what they believed was Every's location, but each time authorities arrived, he was already gone. For the next 10 years, rumors swirled. People across the world claimed to have seen him, from Europe to the Americas. But every time someone got close, Captain Henry Every had already vanished. 2. Edward Lowe. Ned Lowe. There's perhaps no pirate in history as brutally violent and sadistic as Edward Lowe. Once you hear how he treated his prisoners, it's enough to make your stomach turn. Feared across the seas, Lowe earned his place in pirate lore for all the wrong reasons. Usually, pirates become infamous through their exploits and the treasures they plundered. But Edward Lowe was different. His legacy wasn't about riches, it was about sheer cruelty. But before diving into what made him so notorious, let's start from the beginning. Edward Lowe was an English pirate who operated near the end of the golden age of piracy in the early 18th century. His criminal streak started young, pickpocketing, gambling, and stealing anything he could get his hands on. Eventually, tired of petty theft, he turned to burglary. Around 1714, as a young man, he moved to Boston, Massachusetts. He got married and had a daughter, but tragedy struck when his wife died during childbirth. Trying to straighten out his life, Lowe began working on a ship hauling logs. But everything changed during one fateful voyage. Out at sea, he asked the captain for food and was told all he had was rum. Furious, Lowe grabbed a loaded musket and fired, killing not the captain, but an innocent crew member standing nearby. Lowe and about a dozen men were swiftly kicked off the ship. The very next day, they commandeered a small vessel and killed one of its crew members. With a ship now under their control, they began their careers as pirates. They sailed to the waters near the Cayman Islands and joined the crew of an already established pirate, George Lowther. After several successful raids, Lowe was given command of his own ship, which he named Rebecca. This is where his infamy truly began. Lowe developed twisted methods of torture for his captives, and while many were horrific, a few stand out for their pure brutality. In one incident, he captured a French cook and mocked him for being a greasy fellow who would fry well, before setting the man on fire. Then there was the notorious case of the ship captain whose lips Lowe cut off, cooked, and forced him to eat while they were still hot. Another favorite method of his was tying sailors' hands with rope, threading it between their fingers, and then lighting it on fire, burning their hands down to the bone. And who could forget the time he personally slaughtered 53 Spanish captives in a single day with his sword? But the list doesn't end there. Lowe frequently raided ships, tied up the crew, stole everything, and then set the ships ablaze, burning everyone alive. Other times, he'd steal all food and supplies and let the crew drift off to starve at sea. Beyond his brutality, Lowe was also a master of deception. He often approached ships under friendly flags, luring them into a false sense of safety before unleashing a violent attack. After 3 years of slaughter, pillaging, and terror on the high seas, in July 1723, Lowe sailed off into open water and was never seen again. Some say he perished in a storm. Others believe his own crew abandoned him on a deserted island. And then there's the theory that he escaped to Brazil, living out the rest of his life under a new identity. 1. Blackbeard. I mean, who else could it have possibly been? Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, stands as the most iconic, feared, and legendary pirate of all time. His image is still felt today across films, television, and video games, and for good reason. Teach was an English pirate who operated around the West Indies and along the eastern coast of North America from 1716 to 1718. While little is known about his early life, the world would come to know him only once he transformed into the infamous Blackbeard. He was an imposing figure, standing around 6'5", with a long, thick black beard that he braided. He wore a black coat, a wide-brimmed hat, and a bandolier loaded with pistols and daggers across his chest. And as if that wasn't terrifying enough, Blackbeard would light slow-burning fuses in his hat, beard, and hair before boarding enemy ships. The sight of flames and smoke pouring from his head was so horrifying that most crews surrendered without even putting up a fight. Blackbeard's rise began in the spring of 1716, when he first appeared as a captain with a crew of around 70 men. That year, they sailed up and down the American East Coast, raiding and plundering 8 merchant ships. It was during this period that Blackbeard joined forces with Stede Bonnet, the gentleman pirate, who we talked about earlier in the list. What truly catapulted Blackbeard into pirate infamy was his capture of La Concorde, a massive French slave ship carrying around 500 enslaved people. After seizing control, he released the crew and the captives on the island of Bequia, though they were captured again just days later. Now in possession of a formidable vessel, Blackbeard renamed it Queen Anne's Revenge and outfitted it with 40 cannons. He and his crew then embarked on one of the most vicious looting sprees in history, sailing through the Caribbean, into Mexican waters, and up the east coast of North America, attacking nearly every ship they encountered. One notable raid involved a large merchant ship called Great Allen, which earned Blackbeard a mention in the Boston newsletter and further cemented his fearsome reputation. By this point, Blackbeard had become a household name, but he wasn't done yet. On May 17, 1718, he orchestrated his boldest stunt, positioning 4 ships just off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina, far enough to stay hidden from view. There, he ambushed every vessel attempting to enter or leave the port. For 5 or 6 days, Blackbeard and his fleet captured and looted 9 ships, including one carrying Charleston citizens. He held them hostage and demanded a chest of medicine in exchange, which was eventually delivered. It was around this time that he and Stede Bonnet parted ways. Bonnet would soon be captured and hanged, while Blackbeard sailed north to North Carolina, where he accepted a royal pardon and vowed to abandon piracy. He settled down, even marrying his 14th wife, and seemed to be leaving the pirate life behind. But of course, that wasn't the end. Blackbeard never truly gave up piracy, and many believed the local governor looked the other way, as Blackbeard's activities brought economic benefits to the town. Eventually, the governor of Virginia had had enough. He dispatched the Royal Navy to hunt him down. On the morning of November 22nd, 1718, they ambushed Blackbeard in a battle that escalated fast. Outnumbered 3-1, Blackbeard and his men fought fiercely for about an hour. In the end, he fell with 25 stab wounds and 5 gunshots. His head was severed and hung from the Navy's ship, while his body was tossed into the ocean. Later, his head was mounted on a pole at the entrance of Virginia's Hampton River, a chilling warning to all pirates. Blackbeard's reign of terror may have lasted just over a year, but in that brief time, he captured over 40 ships and left behind one of the most fearsome legacies in pirate history.